It's Reality Check with Craig Price.
I'm an idiot.
4 minutes in and I'm already wrong.
I'm like a monkey. Hello, look at me. Craig, shut up.
Hey, I need you guys to do these things.
You're like a beautiful mind. I'm more like Forrest Gump. So it's Reality Check with Craig Price. I am Craig Price, and this week, Dr. Alice Waagen is on the show to talk about delegation. I am certainly a pro-delegation person. You know, I think far too many people forget, or more likely, they feel like they can't ask for help. But it's really a situation where it's about time management and priorities. If you understand the two things, you can really start to understand that delegation is a great tool to allow you to use your time better and prioritize better. So Dr. Waagen is going to help us understand delegation, when to delegate. She's also going to be speaking along with myself at the IPMA-HR, that's the International Public Management Association Human Resources, Eastern Region Conference in Hyannis this June 25th to the 27th. If you're going, make sure you come by and say hello. I do not bite. I can't speak for Alice, but let's assume she's safe to approach as well. I know there's a lot of zombie stories in the news, but we'll assume that Alice is not part of that. She seemed like a lovely woman when we talked, so why don't we just get to it, and we'll talk delegation with Dr. Alice Waagen.
When it comes to delegation, I see two types of delegation. Either I see people give too much away, and then then you wonder what they do for a living because they've given all their work away and they're just kind of wandering around, peeking up on people and checking up on them, or they don't give anything away. So
yes.
Is there a holy grail of where someone can meet in the middle?
Absolutely. In fact, I call that politely the management continuum. And if you can think of a continuum of, two extremes, on one extreme end is micromanagement, and on the other extreme end is what I call dump and run or throw it over the fence management. What dump and run management looks like is something like this. I'm sitting at my desk and my manager comes running by saying, here's a project for you. I know it's a real challenge. It's something you've never done before. I'm here to help you. But, oh, by the way, I'm going out of town for 2 weeks and it's due next week to the big boss. And then they walk away. That's the one extreme. Now, the other extreme is, here's a job that's very challenging. I know you're up to it, but I would like you to check in with me every step of the way, and I'll direct you how you're going to do it. Now, the reason I use the word continuum is that actually every range between there is acceptable. It depends on the type of an assignment and the person that you're giving it to. If you've got a new hire, somebody new to the organization, going closer to the micromanagement end of the spectrum may not be a bad thing. If they're an experienced staff member, though, being down there is probably not a good thing. The dump and run that I call it may not be a bad thing. If you've got a senior professional who's done this kind of work before, dropping it on them and walking away could be totally acceptable. So herein gets one of the key decision points in delegation. What is the assignment and who are you giving it to? You can't make it a blanket situation for everyone. Each delegation assignment has to be evaluated independently because the manager may need to give more or less direction, more or less guidance, depending on the person and the nature of the assignment. And that's where I see one of the fundamental challenges with managers who delegate poorly is they tend to think it's the same thing every time. I will delegate, I will check in weekly for 1 hour, look at 3 things, and then walk away. Now, for some people, checking in weekly would be defined as micromanagement. For others, it's abandonment. And that's why you have to adjust each assignment to the level of managerial guidance every time. That's, I think, one of the fundamental rules.
And I'm here with Dr. Alice Waagen, like Volkswagen. And one of the things I think it's not just, you definitely have to understand who you're going to be delegating to. But I have a feeling that sometimes managers are too internal about it, and it's a reflection of them. Delegating can be a reflection of them. Am I giving something that I should be doing to someone. But that can end up, that's that micromanaging where it's hoarding information. They don't want to give out too much stuff because they feel like they're giving all their power away, or they feel like they're not doing the work. But I think that people need to learn how to delegate because they can burn out fairly quickly, don't you think?
Absolutely. There is, and you've touched on a couple points there, Craig, but let me start at the last one.
I like to throw a lot at once because that way I can kind of be quiet for a bit.
Yeah, there you go. When I do programs in delegation, I subtitle my program Developing Others Through Shared Work. And there is really the crux of why effective delegation is so critically important. Everyone at any level of the organization hopefully wants to develop and advance. It's kind of the American dream. So if I'm a manager and I've got a full plate, my goal to get to the next level up is to take on more challenging assignments at that next level. Well, the only way I can do that effectively is if I take my work that's at my bottom level and pass it downhill. So you can see as delegation, where delegation, I should say, is successful, there's a continuous cascading of work that allows people to do, let's say, most of their work at the level they are, but to have those one or two key assignments that allow them to grow to the next level. Now, you have a manager that doesn't delegate, you literally put a log jam in there. They don't have the bandwidth to take on work above them. The people below them never get that developmental experience, and you get an organization that's frozen in time. I actually see this a lot in my line of work, and where that's deadly is then if anyone in that circle leaves, which many of them will because they'll get fed up, you don't have any bench strength built up. You don't have people who have shared assignments and know how to cross-fertilize each other. So you end up with kind of a situation that looks like this. Everyone's overworked and burned out. They're frustrated and demotivated because they're not challenged and they don't see where they're going to go. And every now and then when somebody quits and leaves, you see everyone else in a panic because they're not entirely sure how to handle that workload that's now been vacated. So that's the negative side of not delegating, and it's a pretty ugly one. Now, you mentioned something else, Craig, though, that I want to come back to, because a lot of my workshops, I ask the question, what's getting in the way of managers effectively delegating? And believe it or not, there's two issues that come up that as much as I love to talk very rational and logical, there's always people, and people have these little vague things called personalities.
No, I understand. We got to talk about feelings and hopes and
Yeah.
I'm with you. I understand.
And the two things that come up that make me sort of mentally and sometimes physically go, ouch, are power, ego, and then actually a third one, trust. So everybody can kind of buy into the scenario I just said. It's good for organizations. Everybody should delegate. But if I share my knowledge, am I sharing power? Am I at risk of having that person maybe do a better job than I did and have ego issues and power egos? Then the other thing is, do I trust the people around me? And that's a big one, especially for, I hate to categorize, but type A aggressive management. They fundamentally believe nobody can do the work but them. And there's a lack of trust. Now, those things have got to be faced and overcome. Or you end up with the scenario I described, where everyone's hoarding it, lacking their information, doing it all themselves, and that ends poorly in every situation.
Well, when you talk about trust, I've seen also the reverse of that, where a leader or manager becomes too dependent on one person to delegate to. They'll take it to their. It's almost like being the best performer in the office can be detrimental because they always come to you. Yeah. I mean, they know that you are always going to get things done because you always have, but at some point they're going to start, they're going to get you at a point where you will fail just by sheer volume.
Yeah. That's that old, how does that phrase go? Your success is rewarded, by more work.
No good deed goes unpunished?
That's the one, yeah. Well, and there's a couple of again, personality types or whatever that I see in the workplace that are problematic. Number one, the person who wants to take it all on and who's always saying yes will get dumped on, but then their opposite number, often on the same team, is the person who effectively manages up and achieves a light workload by either just refusing the assignments or doing the assignments slower than everyone else or doing them with maybe not the world's best attitude. And so over time, you get departments, you get groups of people, you've got the go-to people, and you've got the people that are underperforming. Savvy managers who spot that and manage to eradicate that do well. The ones that don't can create workplaces where they're really not pleasant places. There's resentment by the people who are burned out and overloaded. They're resenting, interestingly enough, they don't so much resent their underperforming coworkers. They resent the boss because the boss is the one that allows that to happen. So that uneven distribution of workload is kind of what we call that technically. And I counsel managers a lot, really keep a good chart or file or something going where you can see the workload for every individual in your work group and be very careful not to allow certain individuals to get overloaded and burned out because they're taking on the work that the other ones are just kind of pushing off on them.
Yeah, and when can we start seeing signs of we're overloading our folks? I mean, because what you don't want to do is wait until collapse.
Right.
And if you're not a good delegator, you've got to take some time out to figure out, when is the last straw going to break the camel? And you don't want to get to that last straw. So are there some signs that we can start looking for?
Sure. Well, I'll give you the perfect situation, then we'll back off from there. I mentioned the word trust earlier. In a perfect world, or as perfect as we can get it, every manager should strive to build up a strong, trusting relationship with every one of their direct reports, where they feel comfortable going to the boss and saying, "Boss, enough is enough, back off my case," and not feel like they're going to get punished or reprimanded for that kind of an attitude. If there's open, trusting relationships, the boss really doesn't have to do much. The employee will come to him and tell him, "Hey, I've had too much. I need some time off. I need you to back off." And they will accommodate that and then continue to build the trusting relationship. Now, when that's not there, and a lot of times there isn't because, bosses are human too, and maybe the first time the staff person said, "I've had too much," they bit their head off, and so now they don't say anything. Then, there's some classic things to look for. Error rates, quality of work, timeliness, and general demeanor, physical demeanor. Are they looking tired and strung out? Are they coming in late? Do they have what we call the Monday-Friday syndrome, where they're coming in late on Monday and leaving early on Friday? These are all symptoms of somebody that's in trouble and needs help. But, I try my best to tell folks, build those trusting relationships because it makes life easy. They will simply tell you, and then you can accommodate to that.
And I think you have to learn how to delegate as you go along because certain people have certain skills, so you can't just spread everything evenly because some people have different assets.
Yep. Well, and it gets to our management continuum. If you do have people that it's a huge stress assignment, they're new to the area, and you're hovering closer to the micromanagement end of the continuum, that's going to take more of your time. And you got to know that when you make the assignment. I'm going to delegate this. I could do it faster myself, but I'm going to delegate it because it's going to be a learning experience. But I go into the thing knowing that I've got to schedule meetings and I've got to do some hand-holding and directing. I cannot do a dump and run on this one. And when you know that and you consciously go into it and clear your calendar to accommodate it, the payoff long-term is well worth the time you spend up front because now you've raised this person's success rate, their self-confidence and everything else. Now the next assignment, you're moving up that continuum. You're not needing all that hand-holding. And again, you're growing those skills over time. But critically, you have to understand what you're dealing with, and you have to understand the nature of the assignment. And again, I believe in a trusting relationship. The boss can delegate and say, "Now, I think you and I need to talk every week on this. But if you feel that that's too much, say something, and we can go from there." And if there's trust there, you can negotiate where you are on the management continuum as opposed to just guessing.
And when it comes to, it sounds like even if you can get it done, sometimes you actually have to delegate even if you don't need to, so to speak. Like where I don't need to delegate because I'm overloaded. I need to delegate so I can start bringing people up.
Yeah, exactly. It falls more into a plane of what I call strategic management than tactical. Tactical is what hits my plate, I deal with it. What hits my plate, I deal with it. Strategic is saying, where will I be 2 months from now if I delegate this or if I don't delegate it? And really looking at the long range, the investment of time today, where it's going to pay off in the future. Sadly, many managers today, because of the pressures they're under, don't do a lot of long-range thinking. I mean, their long range is getting to the end of the work week. And if the assignment they're given, they've got some very vocal internal clients or senior leaders beating them up to get it to them right away, and it darn well better be perfect, they may be reluctant to delegate it just because of that. And, again, that's understandable, but as I tell managers, every time you don't delegate, acknowledge that you're stuck with that. Whatever that assignment is, you're stuck with it forever because you don't have anyone else trained to help you or take it over.
And if you're in C-level executive and you see one of your managers struggling to delegate, is there something that is there some way, a method that we can kind of push them towards delegation without, coming out and say, hey, start giving stuff away?
Yeah. Well, one thing I talk about a lot, when I mentioned, again, this management continuum, there are levels of delegation. If we go to the bottom level, close to that micromanagement, maybe it's a big assignment and I'm only giving out a few small pieces, but I'm doing at least partial delegation. I might be asking someone to research an issue and bring it back to me. Okay? That's beginning to go down that road. And I think even the poorest delegator can begin to start parsing out smaller pieces of the overall assignment. Now, if you go all the way to the other end, and I should probably think of a better word for it than dump and run.
Well, I thought it sounded a lot. Well, for me, it sounded like a situation I call Seagull management, which is where the seagulls, the manager hovers above, and then they swoop down, crap on everything, and fly away.
Yes, that works too.
It's like a helicopter parent in reverse, where the helicopter parent comes down and fixes everything and flies away. The seagull manager kind of just craps and runs. Yeah,
we might call that dive bomb management. That might be.
There you go.
Yeah. Okay, well, in dive bomb management, it is what I call total delegation. You almost could even call it, reassignment. You're just taking the whole thing, putting it on somebody's desk and walking away. Now, what makes the difference in moving up the continuum is the degree of authority that I'm giving that person. And by authority, I mean the degree to which they can make independent decisions along the way. So, again, at the lower end, first level delegation, research it and bring it back to facts. They're not deciding anything, but they're actually just sort of researching, looking into it, coming up with certain ideas. Now, I might go a few steps away from that and say, research it, bring me 4 or 5 options, and then do some analysis and recommend an option to me. Okay, now there's a tiny little bit of decision-making being transferred. Is make a judgment on what's the best path and bring that to me and convince me that's the best path. Now, as we go up this ladder or continuum, you get deeper into the work. Some of the decisions that are very critical points are resource decisions, budget decisions, and timeline decisions. So when I delegate the task, do I say, okay, here's the budget line for it, but if you need to go over by 20%, that's your option. Wow, that's a huge level of authority I just gave away. Or it could be, you have no budgetary authority in this. I'm going to assign you a half a head count and $10,000, and that's it. So you see how much ability I give someone to put their judgment and analysis and decision into it is increasing their autonomy and increasing them taking on the delegation. So that, again, gets back to my original point. Understand the assignment. Now, it could be that this is a very senior person, they're very capable, but it's a very politically charged type of a project. And it may be, you're sitting with the person going, I think your judgment is great, but unfortunately, what I've been told by the boss, I've got to make all the decisions. Here's the interesting thing. In a way, it doesn't matter how much you're delegating to the person. What matters most is that you're open in communicating that much. What I mean by that is I find the biggest sort of breakdowns and horrors in the workplace is the boss believes they're doing a certain level of delegation and the employee thinks it differently. So either the employee thinks it a much lower, they're expecting a lot of guidance and they're not giving it. And then what you hear from the staff person side is, gosh, I just get this stuff dumped on me and I never know what to do with it. What you hear from the boss is, I got an underperformer. They drag their feet, they never get the work done. What's really the issue is they didn't openly talk to each other about what their expectations were.
And nobody knows what they're supposed to be doing.
Exactly. And it can go the other way, too. You know, what I hear bosses say, I don't like to give, so-and-so the assignment. Boy, they take it, they run with it, they make all these changes, I never know what's going on. That's a disconnect between what's in the boss's mind in terms of their managerial oversight and what's in the employee's mind. Now, if they just sit down at the beginning of the assignment and map it out and say, this is how we're going to communicate, update, these are the decision points and who's going to make those decisions, wow, the thing runs pretty smooth.
Now, do you notice any generational component to that where, obviously the more experienced are more likely to take on delegation, they'll be able to take it and run with it and maybe not want any interference. But I know a lot of the younger workers, when they come into the workplace, they are constantly looking for that. When you were talking about checking in once a week, is that too much or too little? That may be too little once a week for some of the younger workers. They like that constant feedback. So have you noticed that component of delegation with the generations?
Yeah, well, yes, there are generational differences across the board. The challenge is, I think you need to be open that there can be differences, but not necessarily jump to conclusions, because I have seen with the current entry-level generation in the workforce, I never remember what they're called anymore, Gen Y, Z, X, whatever.
Millennials or whatever.
Yeah.
They're usually called Connor or Hunter or Heather.
Yes, Heather, Melody,
Yeah. Dakota. So that's to find someone who is named after a former territory in the Western states.
Good point. Well, there's two types somewhat, and again, there's probably more, but there is the, I'm new to this, I need guidance, but then there's the B, I'm top of my class, I know what I'm doing, you're older than me, you can't possibly know, give me the assignment and let me run with it. And again, I think the issue is whether it's generational, whether it's cultural, whether it's gender, there's so much opportunity for me to be thinking differently than the people around me that if I don't sit down, slow down my time and say, here's the assignment, now let's talk about your role and my role, and let's get a mutual understanding about the level of support you think you need and the level of support I think you need.
And how can we approach that? That was going to ask you, because that can be a little, especially if you're new, it can be a little intimidating to start asking for help so soon. And it's even more intimidating if you've been a veteran person and you need some help. To go in and say, look, this isn't working out. I've been doing this so many years, and now the way you do it doesn't mesh. It's hard for that conversation to start. So how can we foster an environment where they can actually start talking that way, get them building that trust?
Yeah, well, you use the T word. That's the issue. If there's openness and trust, the conversations aren't as difficult. If there isn't openness and trust, and in fact there's a bad history, then it becomes more challenging.
How about we assume we'll assume there's no history. I don't want to say bad history, because that assumes that already went. Even though I'm a negative person, let's just kind of, I don't want to assume there's animosity. Let's just say you're just in a new job. You're a veteran who's been working for years. They hired you because of your experience, and now you're having to deal with this new boss that you don't know. So it's not even a matter of history. They just don't even know each other.
Yeah. Well, here's where I tell managers where they need to start is before they even talk to the staff person. In fact, before they even select who it is, they need to sit down, take a good hard look at the assignment, and map it out. What are the desired outcomes? What is the results? What are measures, metrics? What the heck are we trying to do here? And define that as carefully as possible. And that's your first decision point, because sometimes managers take on assignments or projects where they're not well defined and they're not certain what the outcome is, and they're not certain where the thing is going to go. I mean, that's the reality of life. It'd be lovely if everything was concrete. So they sit down and look at the thing and see how well defined it is. Second step I recommend is take a few minutes and talk about or think about who are the stakeholders of this project or assignment. Who are the individuals in the organization that this work is going to touch or impact in any way? And now you jump over the fence to the politics side. Who are these individuals and groups? What impact is this work going to have on them? How volatile is it? So now you're looking at volatility and you're looking at how well defined it is. If those areas are things like highly volatile and very fuzzy, you may at that point stop and say, I'm not delegating this. It's a ticking time bomb. I'm keeping it on my desk till I have more data and information. But let's say point 3, there is somebody senior on the staff who's handled this kind of time bomb before. Then start with a conversation. Sit down across from them and together map out what they think this thing looks like. If they are experienced, they may actually have some insights that you don't have. But at that point, what you're trying to determine is reasonableness. Are there enough resources to accomplish this in terms of people, time, dollars? Is there a reasonable success factor? At that point, since this has been discussed openly, it's ready at that point to make the decision to pass it off, and to what degree on that management continuum does the manager need to be involved in it. If this is done as a dialogue, as you say, there's no bad blood here, it's a blank slate.
Not yet, anyway. There will be, but there's not any bad blood yet.
Not yet, exactly.
I'm just assuming there will be later on.
Yeah.
There will be blood.
Yeah, there will be blood. But the critical thing in that little discourse I had was, it's perfectly okay for a manager to go, whoops, this is a non-delegatable task. That's better than, again, dumping it on somebody, don't have the answers, it's unsure, and it's highly visible. Now you've put 2 careers on the line, not just one. And the career of the person underneath you, again, if we're talking a hierarchy, they don't have necessarily the political clout to survive something like that. Now that's a bad situation because now you got trust issues and all kinds of other stuff going on.
But
there are certain... Yeah.
I was going to say the performance of people below you, if you're a manager, their performance reflects on you, just like your performance reflects on them.
Mm-hmm.
And I think
exactly.
that reciprocity, the back and forth. I'm on drugs. I'm not going to say, I was going to say reciprocity, but I can't even say it right now. The back and forth, the mutual symbiotic relationship. See, right. I've got the thesaurus right here. I'm ready to go.
The intertwined dependencies.
Yeah. People forget that it's not a one-way street with managers and employees. It's not always about, well, how do they reflect on me as a manager? It's also, well, how does a manager reflect on them as an employee, and are they loyal to the company or the organization through you?
Yeah. Well, now here's another point, Craig. We're talking about setting this all up at the beginning, but there isn't anything that says, nor should it be, casted in concrete at that point. Let's say this project is chunking along and it's pretty, and then all of a sudden the senior level spotlight gets shown on it. Shined?
It's contagious. I've given you my, I guess it's word salad or whatever we're going to call it.
It's come through the phone lines. So now let's do a scenario. Let's say I'm an IT guy and we need to look at a new security package. We need to go to the market and research different vendors for, heightened security. Our package is getting a little bit old, etc. This has got, not a critical due date on it. I give it to someone who's done a little bit of it in the past, but, I want it to be a stretch assignment. Everything's, going along smoothly. Suddenly, our main system is hacked, and we end up on the front page of the paper. That project goes from low level to a screaming, code red. Now, do I then go back to that staff person and say, well, you know what? We said it this way from the beginning. We are going to change it. Heck no. I would go back and say, wow, I'm not letting you, cook on the grill out here. I'm joining you with this. We're going to now partner on this. And I'm going to be, covering your back and running lead and keeping, the hounds at bay while you do the work or whatever it takes. I call that Smokey and the Bandit management. Yeah.
Where you would be you would be Jerry Reed in the truck delivering the goods, and I am Burt Reynolds running around deflecting Jackie Gleason from you. which would be the shareholders or the people who are asking questions.
Yes, and I think you just dated both of us, the fact that you said that, and I know exactly what you're talking about.
Well, it happens. I am, all my references are from 1984 and before, so, and I'm not even 40 years old yet. That's how sad I am. But
wow.
before we go, I just have that brain. It's okay. But before we go, I wanted to let people know that you will be at the IPMA Eastern Region on June 25th. You've got a great breakout on delegation there. Unfortunately, I do not show up until a day or two later. So if you're still there, I hope to get the chance to meet you. But where can people find you if they want to know more about you and your business?
Absolutely. The fastest, easiest way is to go to my website. It's www.workforcelearning.com. And workforce learning is all one word. There's wealth of information on there, including some past newsletter articles I have on delegation, as well as some tips of the month on how to handle delegation. My contact information is on there, both email, phone number, snail mail address. I'd be happy to go on at great length about this. As you can tell, I have a passion for it. So yes, www.workforcelearning.com, and I likewise hope to see you at IPMA HR in Hyannisport at the end of June.
Well, I'm definitely looking forward to it. I don't get back up to New England very much, and that starts a 2-week period where it's just me in Boston for 2 weeks, so it's going to be real fun. I really appreciate you taking time out of your very busy schedule to be here, and if I had some people, I would delegate the editing of this to someone else, because I'm gonna definitely start reading my thesaurus and studying my words.
Sounds like a good idea.
Well, thank you, Alice.
You take care.
And the password is reciprocity. Yes, that word was reciprocity. I was trying to say that, but because I had bronchitis and I was on a lot of cough syrup, my brain wasn't functioning. But I do know the word reciprocity. I can say it. Don't ask me to spell it. But I do want to thank Alice Waagen for joining me. Remember, any questions or comments, suggestions, can go to Craig at speakercraigprice.com. We'll see you next week.